Back to Upfront. Now, the Basic Education Department is going ahead with its plans for sexuality education, comprehensive sexuality education. It will pilot the program next year and roll it out fully in 2021. The department says it hopes to decrease the number of sexually transmitted infections and pregnancies of pupils. Not everyone is pleased, though, with this decision, with some parents and interest groups expressing concern. We are joined now by education activist Hendrik Makaneta, educational psychologist Ken Resnick, and Matakanya from the National Association of School Governing Bodies. Thank you so much for coming through. So, Mr. Makaneta, let me start with you. Comprehensive sexuality education is what the department is calling it, and they're saying there's really nothing new here. All that is new are these lesson plans for educators and pupils to be able to navigate what can be an uncomfortable discussion. What's your sense?
Well, thank you very much, Tula Sizwe. My sense is that the department has good intentions, of course, to teach our children about the pros and cons, of these sex activities, which often lead to unwanted pregnancies, to disease, and so on and so forth. But now the challenge for some of us is that if you are going to take a grade 4 learner and teach them about private parts and so on, this good intention may lead to, an unwanted or unintended consequences, in a sense that you may find that, some of them end up also, trying to engage and, practicing these things that they are learning in class. Something that we don't really want as parents and, of course, as activists.
But
because we want our children to grow up, not being exposed to, not being sexually dynamic. Those are the things that should be left for adults.
Mr. Resnick, actually, let me bring you in as someone who works in this area of educational psychology. Mr. Makaneta is expressing concern, and I've looked at the lesson plans, the scripted lesson plans and the diagrams that they have of the human body and the labels that they attach, particularly the grade 4 one. Are his concerns valid from an educational psychology perspective? The transferal of knowledge about the human body to sexual activity that he's concerned about?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a concern. I think it all starts off actually at home, how we bring the kids up, if they've got the right values and so on. There's so much out there for children today that they're seeing, and they know a lot more than we realize. So I don't think it can do any harm. I'm not saying that they should have or shouldn't have it, but I don't believe it's going to have any harm to get some children more sexually active or not sexually active. If they're going to experiment, they're going to experiment, whether it's being taught a lesson or not taught a lesson. So I really, I just think it's an educational thing, whether they understand it or how it's been taught. I think that's going to be important.
So let me stick with you then and ask you, the key phrase that I've heard over and over is age appropriate. Grade 4, I've looked at the scripted lesson plans. In fact, I have some of the diagrams here. They've got a boy and a girl, and basically the diagram labels their body parts, and that's that. But then the lessons are coupled with things about what's comfortable touch. When should you be uncomfortable when someone touches you? Teaching them about HIV and AIDS and the likes. Is this age appropriate for grade 4?
I think... What is age appropriate? I think it really does depend. Kids don't fully understand. I don't say that's age appropriate. A kid, if they're going to experiment, they play doctor, they do play around with each other often. But I think to put terms across that is maybe a bit more abstract. They're not going to fully understand it maybe in grade 4. I don't know if it's going to do any harm. I don't know if it's going to do any good. But I don't think it's going to turn them into some type of sexual pervert or inappropriate person just from a lesson, but it might be a little bit above the conceptual understanding of what they're talking about. That I can see.
Mr. Matakanya, what's your sense? What's your take on this situation? Part of what the department is saying they're trying to address is dealing with the reality that young people in fact, by their statistics, about 35.4% of girls and boys experience sexual violence before the age of 17. So we do live in a society where these are realities, and you know, the consideration from the department is that perhaps if you teach them young, so that they know that these are my private parts and this is what they are called, and I shouldn't be comfortable with someone touching me in any of my private parts. Are they on the money?
Thank you very much, Tula, and all your listeners. Let me first congratulate the Department of Education of meeting us as National Association of School Governing Bodies on the 27th of November, meaning last week Wednesday. We met with the Department of Education, and we are grateful that they considered that they did not consult us.
Sure.
And then from that on, and they agreed that they are going to start consulting with us. And we are grateful that at the end, really, they listened to what we were saying. Look, Tula, we really don't have problems with what you are raising if this is to address the social ills. But what concerns us is the content. The content must be determined by the parents. And the Education White Paper 1 allows the parents to be part. When you look at the Constitution, Section 15, it also allows us to be part. And lastly, South African School Act number 84 of 1996, Section 16, capital A, it also allows the powers of the minister, and also it says the minister has the power to determine the curriculum of outcome. But what I'm saying, Tula, is that now I think we are happy that we are going to discuss the matter with the department.
Part of what Mr. Resnick is raising is the issue of what you are teaching the children at home. And Mr. Matakanya also raising the same point about the role of the parent in determining the content of what children are taught, what's appropriate in as far as their bodies and sexuality are concerned. But there's a loophole there, isn't there? I mean, not all homes, not all parents will be comfortable giving labels to the body parts the way that is done in this lesson 4.1 of the scripted lesson plans, for example. So what happens then? Because it will be inconsistent.
Yeah, well, generally, most African families in particular, because that's where I come from, will never ever be comfortable with, identifying these body parts, talking about them openly to an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old child. They are still young, and, we also have issues of moral degeneration in the country. So, African parents are not so much comfortable with naming them. I can speak for myself and others that I know. And it will obviously become a very difficult, process to carry through with if you involve parents. Yeah. But at the same time, I think, we are battling. Our grade 4 learners are unable to read for meaning as it stands. And already we are introducing this CSE in the curriculum. And for me, that is a cause for great concern. Because we are entering the 4th industrial revolution. We should be focusing on things that will actually make our learners to make a meaningful contribution into the economy, and not things that really will not affect the economy.
Final word to you, Mr. Resnick. The scripted lesson plans have two versions. One version is for the pupils, and one is it's a bit more detailed. It's for the teachers. What's your word about the fine line and the balancing act that the teachers have to sort of play in teaching some of these topics to pupils as young as 11 years old?
Yeah, 11 years is almost pre-teen. Some young girls having had their periods at 11 these days. So the kids are very sexually aware. The teachers obviously got to be comfortable. They've got to build up the children's trust in order to not get them to giggle, to understand. It's the way they're going to put it across, but we can't underestimate what the kids are exposed to and what they know, especially on the playground. I think we'd be shocked if we actually knew. So it's something that we've got to be aware of and not be blind to. What kids are exposed to. Now, how do we then bring that to their attention, the dangers, and educate them in terms of how to behave appropriately?
Sure. All right. Thank you so much for coming through, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time.